No training, no. No, not at all at that time. But then after that, I was probing and waking Ray Charles up when he came to town. I was 14 years old and Ray came to town from Florida. He wanted to get away from Florida and he asked a friend of his, because he had sight until he was 7, to take a string from Florida and get him as far away from Florida as he could get. And boy, Lord knows that's Seattle. As far, if you go any further, you're in Alaska and Russia. And so Ray showed up and he was at 16 years old and he was like, God, you know. He had an apartment, he had a record player, he had a girlfriend, 2 or 3 suits. I mean, I used to come, and when I first met him, you know, he'd invite me over to his place. I couldn't believe it. He was fixing his record player. He'd shock himself because there were glass tubes in the back of the record player and the radio. And I used to just sit around, I can't believe you're 16 and you got all this stuff going. Because he was like, he was 30 then. He was like really an old dude, you know. He knew how to arrange and everything. And he used to taught me how to arrange in Braille. And the notes, he taught me what the notes were, because he understood. He says, dotted eighth and 16th, that's a quarter note and so forth. And I just struggled with it and just plowed through it. No, he was one of them. Bumps Blackwell was too, and a barber named Eddie Lewis was another guy. But it was kind of, you know, fresh air taxi cab music lessons. And then we finally got a formal teacher named Frank Waldron, who was a trumpet teacher. It was African-American with a bald head, and he used to wear striped pants and like the English Parliament guys. He stepped out of the Harlem Renaissance or someplace. He had a little pint of gin, a little flask every night. He'd take a sip, you know, at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And he said, let me hear you play something. And he was legit, you know, from the legit Rafael Mendez, you know, legit trumpet players. So we had our bebop thing. We had our little look and, you know, a little swagger and our fingers all the way over there. So incorrect rather. And I played Stardust just like I played it in nightclubs, because we were playing in nightclubs when we were 13 and 14. Just start playing. Just do it. Just blow in it and sound bad for about a year, and you get sound a little bit better. And then you get a few jobs, and you get a little band together. And 4 guys that sound half bad, if you're 25% each, we can get 100%, you know? And so Charlie Taylor and Buddy Catlett, 4 guys, we got together, and we practiced every day, you know, every day. 1947, we got our first job for $7, and the year after that, we played with Billie Holiday, you know, with the Bumps Blackwell, Charlie Taylor band, and our confidence was building because we danced, we sang, we played modern jazz, we played schottisches, pop music at the white tennis clubs, you know, room full of roses and to each his own and all those things, and we'd play the black clubs at 10 o'clock, you know, and play rhythm and blues, and for strippers and do comedy and everything else. At 3 o'clock in the morning, we'd go down to Jackson Street in the red light district and play bebop free all night, because that was really what we really wanted to play, like Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, and Dizzy and all those people, and they'd come through town. And in the following year, Bobby Tucker, who was Billie Holiday's musical director, came back, and he liked what we did, evidently, and we played with Billy Eckstine. And then Cab Calloway came through. We opened for Cab Calloway, so our confidence was very strong. I had written a suite call from the Four Winds that the University Band played before I got out of high school. Gus Mankurtz had a band there, and we went in from high school and played with the University Band and wrote the arrangements and the composition, and they played it. So, I mean, they knew what was happening. They knew what I was doing. And I remember they put the picture on the front page of the Seattle University paper and stuff like that. Lionel Hampton heard about this Four Winds thing, and he tried to ask me to join the band when I was 15. I hurried up and got on the bus. I didn't want to ask my parents or anybody want to take a chance of losing it. And I got there, and I just shut up like a little mouse, and everybody got on the bus. It was almost ready to take off, and Gladys Hampton got on and said, "What's that child doing on this bus?" And I said, "Oh, my God." She said, "Lionel, get that boy off of that. That's a child. That's not a grown-up. Put him back in school." You know, she said, "I'm sorry, son, but, you know, you're too young. Go back to school." And I was destroyed, you know. And so she says, "We'll talk about it later." And when I got my scholarship to Boston, sure enough, this lady, Janet Thurlow, who was in the band, kept reminding them of me. And they called me one day, and I was so happy. I'm telling you, you have no idea. And I told the dean there, I said, I'll be back. And he knew I'd never be back. Because once you get out there with professional musicians like that and working 71 nighters in a row, and all through the South, and band bus doing 700 miles a night with these guys that have been out there 30 years, you know, old guys. I used to watch the old guys. I really respected their wisdom. And there was a guy named Bobby Plater who wrote the Jersey Bounce. He was like the musical director. Wonderful man. He was kind to me, too. A lot of the old guys wouldn't talk to me because I was an arranger and a trumpet player, and they felt, you know, threatened. I don't know. I guess that happens. But I used to watch him and the guitar player who'd been out there 30 years, and they knew all the cheap hotels. You know, we made $17 a night. You had to learn how to do that, too. And they had wash and wear shirts to carry in the sax case, so I got one of those. And when they get in a hotel, we go to Father Divine's for 15 cents, you know, have the stew and stuff, and say peace when you go in the door. And you put your pants, fold them up, and put your pants underneath the mattress. We couldn't afford to get them pressed. And you put your coat in the bathroom, turn the steam on, hang your wash and wear shirt there, wash your handkerchief, put it on the mirror, and the next morning it's dry, and you pull it off, and it's already pressed, you know. And so I learned all these things from the guys that have been out there, and I just watched. I really paid attention to what was going on. And, you know, one thing leads to another, and you grow. I got a scholarship to Seattle University at first, and then I got another scholarship. The music course was too dry, and I really wanted to get away from home. I wanted to get out of that house. I didn't want to be there. 8 kids and a stepmother, and I just wanted to be out of there. And so when I got a scholarship from Boston to the Schillinger House, which is now the Berklee School of Music, I couldn't wait to get out of there. And my aunt sent me a ticket by train to go there. I stopped in Chicago and then went to Boston at night. The most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my life, because it was pitch black. And you get there and you've got your trumpet and this little bag, your bag of clothes, not much. No place to stay, but I had a scholarship, and that was a blanket, a security blanket I could hold on to. And one thing led to another. I walked around the neighborhood to try to find out where I could stay. I got a place for $10. I had no idea, because Seattle, even though there was racism there from people outside of Washington, and some people in Washington too, it was more on of a level of a lower education basis, you know, and sailors and so forth. But when and you have to realize the school, Garfield High School, we just had a 50-year reunion this year. I went back with my architect, Jerry Allison. That school is the school that America dreams, in its wildest dreams, that they hope they have in 50 years from now. That school had everything: Filipino, Jewish, black, Chinese, everything. The richest white kids in town from Broadmoor and Mount Lake, you know, everything, all together. And it was no big deal. Nobody, I mean, sure they thought about it, you know, because there's a couple of times I was dating the girls and so forth. And I married one of the girls from that school. And in her chapter in the book, she talks about getting thrown out of all the top sororities and everything else because they were very popular girls in school. And I didn't even know until I read her chapter in this book 50 years later, you know, all the stuff that was going on. But that school, regardless of that, was one of the most progressive schools in America at 1947 and 48. Then we hit the road, man, and we get to places like Texas. This is when every place had a white and colored to wait in the bus stations and the water fountains all over America. You couldn't stay in a white hotel anywhere. We'd play dances in New Orleans, and they'd have chairs straight down the middle of the thing with chairs to go both ways, and white on this side and that side. Other places in New Orleans and in North Carolina and South Carolina, they'd have $2.50, $3.50 general admission for the black people. White spectators, $1.50. I still have the signs, you know. They'd sit upstairs and drink and watch the black people dance, you know. Oh, it was unbelievable. We'd play juke joints and people would get shot, and we'd go through Texas. We always had a white bus driver because we couldn't stop at the restaurants, and sometimes we'd see effigies like black dummies hanging by nooses from the church steeples in Texas. Now, yeah, it's pretty heavy on the church steeple, and they've got a black dummy hung, which means don't stop, don't even think about coming here. And the bus kept moving, you know. And then they'd finally get places where we'd get the driver, the white driver would go in and get food for the band. And sometimes in Newport News, we slept, remember Jimmy Scott and I slept in a funeral parlor where the bodies were. There was no hotel. So this guy said, I got a place, you can stay here these 2 days. And when you got $17 a night, you can't, you know, you're not thinking about some suite at the Waldorf. You know? It's painful. It's a killer. It slaps your dignity just right. I mean, all of the things that I loved about the idea of these proud, dignified black men in the bands and so forth, and I saw the older ones wounded, and it wounded me 10 times as much because I couldn't stand seeing them hurt like this, you know. And I know their mentality, their sense of humor, their wit, their intelligence and everything, totally aware of it. And I see people with 1/10 of this, you know, or taking the stance of trying to degrade them, you know, trying to be a giant and make a midget out of them to feel bigger. And I saw it over and over and over and over and over again. It's amazing. I mean, and a thing that's about it is when you're unified, you get a sense of humor about it, or else you either have to get really, and we had confrontations all the time, please, right? We had police run us out of town many a time, you know. And they'd have the joke, you know, you go in a place, you know, we always say, we don't serve niggers here. We say, that's cool, we don't eat them. I mean, it was, you know, you just have to get an attitude about it, you know, because it just, you can't let it take you out like that, you know. It makes you angry, but I always felt that to harness that anger, you know, let's do something that's going to mean something, you know, not rather, okay, you can, if you punch some dude out, you know, that doesn't do anything, because as you're going down, he says, you're still a nigger, you know, and I've seen that happen. So that doesn't straighten. So that's why I get involved in all the battles there are, but on another kind of a level. So I went to Lionel Hampton for 3 years, and out of that came a trip to Europe, which really turned my life upside down, because I went to Europe at 19, and it turned me upside down in many ways. It gave you some sense of perspective of past, present, and future. It took the myopic conflict between just black and white in the United States and put it on another level, because you saw the turmoil between the Armenians and the Turks and the Cypriots and the Greeks and the Swedes and the Danes and the Koreans and the Japanese. Everybody was had these hassles, and you saw it was basic part of human nature, these conflicts, and it opened my soul, it opened my mind, and I was challenged to try to learn 20 or 30 words in every language in the world, and came back to New York after Hamp, freelanced, wrote for almost every singer in the business, and went on a State Department trip in 1956, organized it for Dizzy Gillespie. We toured all over the Middle East and South America. Obviously, you know, when they send a black band around the world as ambassadors, you're going to do a lot of kamikaze work. And we did. They sent us to all what they call hardship post number 4 in Washington. They have categories, and all the plum jobs are in London and France, the ambassadors and so forth. And USIS in the other parts of the world were pretty screwed up. And so we went to Abadan, Iran, and Tehran, and Dhaka, Pakistan, Karachi, and Istanbul, Damascus, which is the dirtiest place in the world. And it was very exciting. Some of these people had never seen Western instruments before. And we got a last-minute call one time from the White House to go immediately from Istanbul and go to Athens, Greece, because the Cypriot students were stoning the embassy. And whenever that happened, we got called immediately. Go in there and play for these same kids. And that was pretty scary, because you could feel the energy and the hostility against whatever policy was going wrong at that time, whether it's Beirut and Israel or the Cypriots and Greeks. And after that concert,
they rushed the stage, the kids, and we thought we were in trouble. And instead, they put Dizzy Gillespie on their shoulders, and they were just running around the auditorium singing to him and everything else. It was great. And they sent us to South America. And back to the United States, then I moved to Paris in 1957 to study with Nadi Boulanger and to work for a record company called Barclay Records. And that was an incredible experience. Went back in 1959 with a Broadway show and a whole big band to play with the show. It was supposed to eventually pick Sammy Davis Jr. up in London and come back to Broadway. And my band was featured in the show with costumes and parts. And plans didn't go that way, so we got stranded in Europe for 10 months after the show closed, which is the closest I ever came to suicide. And we finally came, I hawked everything I had, my publishing companies, and got the band and all 30 people back home. And a friend of mine who was the president of Mercury Records was about to merge with Philips Records of Holland, asked me to work there, that I could pay some of my debts back. And I was vice president 2 years later and got a chance to really learn what the record business was really all about. And I became troubleshooter in Europe and in Greece, and with the mergers between Siemens Electronics and Philips. And it was a great education from the other side of the other perspective of our business, because for the most part, artists feel that all corporations, they might be right, get up at 7 o'clock in the morning figuring out how to get them. And you see it's not quite like that, but it's a whole different perspective. And I learned a lot about the inner workings of the business that I was going to be in eventually 48 years.
They knew I wanted to do whatever I did well. They could tell. I guess they could feel that. And I hadn't gotten it together yet, but they knew I wanted to, and they knew one day I would, I guess, you know. I don't know why they wasted time otherwise. Count Basie, who almost adopted me like at 13, became, you know, gradually became we closer and closer and closer until we ended up playing, I'm conducting for him and Sinatra, you know. It was just like a dream, you know. So all my life, Count Basie was there. He was like, manager, mentor, father, brother, everything. He'd helped me get jobs when I had my big band later. And I remember we played up in New Haven, a job that he didn't want to take. And he said, okay, I got a job for you at band. You got it. And so they got the contracts. We were with the same agency, Willard Alexander. And we got a third of what he would get naturally. And it was a 12 or 1,300 seat place, and only about 700 people showed up. And I was really disappointed and hurt. You know, I had a big band from New York. Basie showed up, you know, and he said, okay. He said, give the man half of the money back. I said, what do you mean give half of the money back? He said, he put your name down front, and the people didn't come. He will be important for you in the future, and you shouldn't hurt him because the people didn't come. Give him half of his money back. I gave him half the money back. He only tried to teach me how to be a human being, you know. And a lot of the guys were like that Oscar Pettiford, you know, that just took me under their wing. And that's why I have no problem and automatically help young people. I just love it, you know, because they did that to me. They were there. And Benny Carter, please. Benny Carter is one of the finest musicians on the planet. He was my idol. When I went to California, Benny put you on his shoulders, you know, give you the target and help you pull the strings, you know, bowstring. Just amazing, you know, that means so much, you know. Benny, we're just close friends now. He's 90, 93 years old, 96 years old. And his mind just as sharp as a tack. And it goes back there. Milt Hinton, people like Milt Hinton, the bass player, that were so kind to me when I first went to New York. And some guys try to take advantage of you, some don't pay any attention to you, and the others embrace you and put their arms around you to help you. We started that in music very earlier, you know. We had to play schottisches and boogie woogie, blues, rhythm and blues, bebop, pop music, concert music, Sousa, everything from the beginning. We played that. That's what a lot of the jazz musicians, when I did Michael Jackson, they said, "You sold out." I was, "I've been doing this all my life." What do you mean sold out? It's not even a stretch, to go from different kinds of music. And if you start out like that, it's not unusual at all. Everything feels good, whether it's Wynonie Harris, or Louis Jordan, or Charlie Parker, or Bartok, or Alvin Berg, or whatever, It always, Nadia Boulanger used to say, there's only 12 notes, so listen to what everybody does with those 12 notes. That's all they are, really. No, not at all. I do now. I do now because later on in life, Alex Haley, who was a dear, dear friend of mine, before he wrote Roots, and we worked on Roots together, he said in fact, Alex was supposed to write this book we're doing now, but he passed. He said, "Where did the music come from, the family?" I said, "I don't know. My mother played a little piano, religious piano, because she was a religious fanatic, and I heard a little of that, but nobody that I remember played in my family before." And so Alex says, "Well, I'll tell you what. For Christmas, I'm going to call some friends of mine in Salt Lake City, Mormons, and they could have saved me 10 years if they had done Roots, because they're the greatest researchers, lineages, and she introduced me to this lady named Johnny Cerny from Lineages in Salt Lake City. And I'm telling you, that Christmas, she sent me a book of information that just blew my head off. I couldn't believe it. Number one, we came from a plantation, my mother's family. It was owned by James Lanier. He was a relative of Sidney Lanier, the poet. And he had a baby with my great-grandmother, I guess, and my grandmother was born there. He was French and Cherokee Indian, this plantation owner, and he mated with a black, and that my grandmother came out, and then my mother, and he traced that thing all the way back, Tennessee Williams, all the way back to the Laniers. I did a concert in Paris last 4th of July, and Nicholas Lanier, there were 14 court musicians. They worked with Henry V, III, and all that. And there were 14 of them, and that was the musical strain, and it shocked me because I always had this ridiculous passion for France. The first time I went there, I couldn't sleep. My heart was pounding. We were coming on the train from Switzerland, and I couldn't sleep. I would get up, and I just stood up in the back of the train all the way. We went into Palais d'Orsay. Palais d'Orsay was a train station, and it's a museum now, and a hotel. So we came in about 6:30 in the morning, and the music almost came from my soul when we came in. We saw that crimson sunrise and the smell of Paris, and I could feel something very strange. And then it all became answered when Alex found these people, this Lanier family. They were Huguenots from England, and they came over to France. One was painted by Van Dyck. So it was all very weird, and it's like you're constantly redefining your life all the time. Even back then, and even when you get older, you're trying to find out where that came from. So it's been an amazing experience, and I'm very nosy, so I'm constantly exploring to find out what the hell happened. What is it all about? What is it? We were in the heart of the ghetto in Chicago during the Depression, and every block, it's probably the biggest black ghetto in America. Every block, it also is the spawning ground probably for every gangster, black and white in America too. So we were around all of that. We saw that every day. There was a policeman named Two Gun Pete, black policeman that used to shoot teenagers in the back every weekend. And everything happened there all the time. A gang on every street, the Vagabonds, the Giles AC, the Scorpions, just on. And they had, in each gang, they had the Dukes and Duchess, Junior and Senior, which accommodated everybody in the neighborhood. That was the whole idea for unity, really. And our biggest struggle every day was we were either running from gangs or with gangs, and was just getting to school and back home, because if your parents aren't home all day, it's a notorious track. I still have to have the medals here from a switchblade through my hand, pinned to a tree. Or I had an ice pick here in the temple one time. But when you're young, nothing harms you, nothing scares you or anything. You don't know any better. And in the summertime, the schools were the roughest schools probably in America. I saw teachers getting hurt, maimed, and everything every day, and it was everyday stuff. Some summers, my father would take us down to visit our grandmother in Louisville, who was an ex-slave, Susan Jones, and she had a shotgun shack, they call it, and no electricity, a well in the back, a coal stove, kerosene lamps. We used to take baths that have these big, cold, heavy black iron pots that take the top off of the stove to get it heated quicker, and wait until it boils, and you pour it in a big tin tub on the floor, and then it'll take you another 20 minutes to do that. I mean, I remember the process, and the security system there was a big rusty bent nail over the back door. And when you're 7, 8, 9 years old, it's all drama. She used to say, go down to the river and grab the rats to still have the tails moving. She'd cook the rats. She takes greens out of the backyard and cook the greens, fry the rats with onions and so forth on a coal stove. And you'd see like almost ice on the floor at night, when it's cold in the wintertime in Kentucky. And a lot of these things I didn't want to really deal with. I asked my brother before he died, I said, is this an aberration in my mind? He said, what are you talking about? That's the way it was. And he kind of affirmed everything that really happened. And it doesn't bother you till later. You say, how could you do that? But at the time, it was just another adventure. It kept your tummy filled, and that's all there was. So you didn't have too much choice. When I went back to Chicago, I was doing a documentary on my life, I guess 1989 and 1990. And when we went back there, the people that produced the show, the film, they just let me get out of the car. I hadn't been back in 50 years to this home where we lived in Chicago. And I got out, and I was hoping it would be a supermarket, everything's gone. It was exactly like it was when we left. The paint job that my father left there was the same paint job. Every room, every radiator, every vent was exactly the same. The backyard, the same wooden fence where this happened, it was all there. And Lucy, this girl who was next door, 12 years old, when I got out of the car, she was like 63 or something in a wheelchair. And it was explosive. It just blew my psyche, shattered it, And when we went upstairs, Lucy, they helped her upstairs with the wheelchair, and she said, that's the bed where they put the straitjacket on your mother. And I had totally blanked it out, but they say, the therapy I've had said that trauma is frozen at the peak. And as soon as she said it, I saw her, that they were the 4 guys holding her down, and she was trying to get away, and they strapped her down and put the straitjacket on her. And then we were out front, on the front step, and Lucy held my brother in her arms and closed his eyes as they put her in the ambulance. And I sat on the other step and I closed my eyes too. And I was crying and I was singing this song, oh, somebody touched me. It must have been the hand of the Lord. And it all came back. All of these things that you've totally blanked out of your mind. It's a strange feeling to feel it re-enter your soul, the reality that you've blanked out conveniently. It's unforgettable stuff, He died from cancer, renal cell carcinoma. And Dr. Dean Ornish is a good friend of mine, and I asked Dr. Dean, Andrew, well, a lot of the people to help me, because I've never been so desperate in my life to my only real brother, and I didn't know what to do. So we went everywhere, to Sloan Kettering, to UCLA, so we saw the best people we could, but it was too late. And Dr. Ornish, who's a good friend of mine, when he finally got to my brother, he'd studied the case, and he said, you can never see, my mother was out of the sanitarium now, she followed us to Seattle, and there was always a conflict between her and my stepmother, and I didn't particularly like either one. Emotionally, I couldn't deal with either one. She was a very, not really a nice lady, the stepmother. And so he said to my brother, and this is key. He said, you could never see your mother again, when he was trying to cure him, because he said, we're dealing with equal parts medical disease, nutrition, and psychological. It's a mental situation. I mean, that's what cancer's about. And you have to play with all three almost on an equal level to deal with it properly. And he said, I bet you can't deal with it. He said, I bet you I can, because he knew, because he took everything in the chest. He stayed in Seattle. And I asked Dean, well, how did this happen? How could my brother, and we came up with the same environment, how could he be so vulnerable to this and just eat it all and take it in and internalize it and everything else and have it turn against him like this to take his life? He's younger than I am. And I'd give half of my body right now to save his life. How did I miss it? And he said, somehow you, in trying to survive, you found a way to totally transfer all need or everything involving a mother into your music or your creativity. And I used to go in a little closet, a little tiny closet that had 4 barrels with some 2x4s and a workbench on it, and just sit there and just turn the world off every time the pain came in, and go inside and just, since I was very young, is to take all the negative things and the painful things and take that and convert it into something beautiful and positive. So, because I could feel that if I turned it on myself and with bitterness, it would kill me and it would take me out, like it did my brother. And I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what the process was about, but here I am at 66 years old when Dean tells me what this is all about, and it's strange because it took my brother out. It killed him. And I had transferred all of the need of what we didn't have, so I didn't need it anymore, because I had something else that was beautiful. It was mine. I could always depend on. I could always go there no matter what happened, racial things or whatever happened. I could go there and it would be okay. And it was my own little world. I could make it what I wanted it to be, So we've spent most of our life almost like little kind of street rats, just running around the street, until we were 10 years old. My father worked for Julian Black, the people that ran Joe Lewis's life. Joe Lewis lived in one of the buildings we lived in. And after one of the fights, he gave the gloves to my father. And a kid down the street had a BB gun that I wanted. And so when my father went to work, I took the gloves and traded the gloves for a BB gun. And my father wore my tail out and went over to get the gloves back. And when he came back with my stepmother, who was his mother, who was not really a very charming lady. She was rough. She made our life pretty rough. And then one day he came by a barber shop when we were about 10 years old, and says, we're leaving town. Because he also worked for the Jones Boys at that time. He was a carpenter, a very good carpenter. And he worked for the Jones Boys, which were not family members, we weren't related at all. And they started the policy racket in Chicago. And they had the 5 and dime store, which they used to call like the V and the X store, for Roman numerals. And we loved all this drama. All kids loved that. We used to go to a place called Drexel Wine and Liquor. You'd go up these big steps, and the administrative office is upstairs, and you'd see everything you saw in Elliot Ness Untouchables. 2-way mirrors and so forth. They got Tommy guns and hats and cigars. We loved it. All kids loved that. And we couldn't understand why Daddy wanted to keep us away from that element. So one day he said, let's get out of here. And I think what happened is Capone took over the policy racket from the Jones Boys. The Jones Boys had to leave town fast, and we were right behind him because Daddy worked with him. So he came and picked us up from the barber shop. We have to go get our toys. Forget that. We went straight to a trailway bus. And the bus took us out to Bremerton, Washington, Seattle, Washington, the ferry. We stopped in Idaho, and we got up to eat. They wouldn't let us eat at the white places, so we had to go find a black family. And you have to remember, this is the day, I'm sure you remember, this is the day when there was no TV, no MTV, you had nothing to hold on to your identity with. The books were C. Jane Run and C. Spot and so forth, and nothing about black history or anything. We're talking about 1943. And radio was Blondie and Dagwood and Gabriel Heater and I Love a Mystery and the black figures there were Rochester, Beulah, and Amos Natty, who were white, Gosman and Freeman. And so it was very, at the time you don't recognize it, but you're trying to say, who the hell am I? You know, what are we about? You know, if you don't have a mother there that leads you down that road, you're trying to figure out who you are. And so we spent half of our life trying to figure out what was up, what we were all about. Now we go from the biggest ghetto in Chicago to being the only 3 black kids in Navy Yard City. And there's a serious contrast. And it dances on your head a little bit because we carried switchblade knives in those days, and the kids in Bremerton didn't know what they were. So you couldn't use fear anymore like they used on us in Chicago. And you just keep going. We got into all the trouble you could ever imagine because we figured that if the Jones boys and all the gangsters in Chicago ran Chicago, well, we had our own territory now. All the stores, all the crime, we were in charge of everything. My stepbrother and my brother. It was amazing, amazing, and of how much trouble you can get in when you don't have anything else to do. And I hadn't discovered music yet, and it was 11 and 12 years old, and we did everything you can imagine. Like chickens in the new apartments, and we'd cook them. We didn't know what we were doing. We stole a box of honey jars one time, went out in the woods and took care of the box, and I don't think I'd touch honey again for 20 years. I never wanted to see honey again. Nothing but survival, especially when there's no medium ground. There was no gray, you know, this was black or white. I mean that in a metaphorical sense. So in the search for your identity, you had to be in constant action trying to do something, even with the relationships and so forth. We were too young. The girls weren't paying attention to us. The girls loved all the young sailors that came through town, and so we used to go visit the destroyers and battleships and aircraft carriers. It was a big Navy town, and that was it during the war. I mean, America was very gung-ho then, and they were the heroes. And the black sailors and soldiers, they had very stylized. They had the hats. They were really cool, you know, and bloused their pants down over the boots and everything, always immaculate and a lot of style and everything else. So the girls just walked all over us, little bumpkins up there. And I still have pictures of me waiting on the porch of this little girl named Sarah Ann. She didn't give me the time and day. We couldn't get arrested. And you were trying to just figure out what you're supposed to be doing in life. You don't know. You can't get a legitimate job. I finally got a job when I was 11 to, this guy named Roscoe asked me to press clothes. You know, there was some nice cheap labor there. And I had a little raggedy bike, and so after I pressed and did a pretty good job, he says, well, you know, why don't you take them to be clean now, and you can fill out the bills and put the paper sack on it and deliver them. And at 11 years old, I was running that whole business for him. And I was proud of that, and I was happy that I was capable of being responsible for something and useful. And there was a big armory up there where everybody played basketball, and it was a community center, really. It was an army camp right there, because this was heavy, you know. But Seattle and Bremerton, that was a hot spot during the war, because that's where they left to go to Japan. So it was really, things were happening all the time. And we'd break into this armory at night, on weekends and at night, and we'd eat pie, lemon meringue pie, and ice cream, and we got too tired of eating it. We'd start to throw it at each other, and whatever trouble you could get in, you know, just awful. And one night we broke in another door, and I broke into this door, and there was a piano there. And I just walked around the room to see what was there at first, and then hands kind of hit the keyboard. And I remember from Chicago, next door when I was a kid, there was a little girl named Lucy that used to play piano. And it brought everything back, because I was never very good at music when I was little. I never paid any attention to it in school. And from that moment on, when I touched those keys, I said, this is it. I'm not going to do the other thing again. I'm going here. And that's what happened. Then I got in the school band in Bremerton and played percussion for a while and stayed after school forever. just tinkering around with different things, and clarinets and violins. I couldn't get into that at all. And so I finally found B-flat baritone horn, sousaphone, E-flat alto peck horn. And I got the trombone because the trombone players in the marching band got to be up front with the majorettes because of the slides. I love that. But my heart was really with the trumpets, but they were too far back. And I finally got to trumpet, and I said, that's what I really feel.
I was inspired by a lot of people when I was young, all over the place. Every band that came through town, at the theater or dance hall, I was at every dance, nightclubs to listen to every band that came through, because in those days we didn't have MTV, we didn't have television, and the communication for music was through Downbeat magazine or the grapevine from what was happening in New York. Radio dealt with it a little bit. We used to pick up a few jazz stations from San Francisco, Jimmy Lyons, and you'd hear some of the new music that was out, like jazz. And they had, the record stores in those days had big glass booths, and you could go in and listen to the record, put earphones on. And I couldn't afford to buy them, so I just stayed in the music store all day and just listened to all of the latest records. And in those days, they had 5 record companies, only 5 record companies. So anybody that was even recording was automatically a giant. On Decca Records, everybody was Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, just the greatest musicians that ever lived on each label. So it wasn't too much Russian roulette going on records those days. Whoever was signed and made records was really pretty phenomenal.
Well, because my grades in music were terrible before that, but then the love and this passion came for it, and that's when somebody lit a flame, a candle inside, and that candle that still burns, and it never went out. And I'd stay up all night, sometimes till my eyes bled, to write the music. I was writing a suite for Concerto in Blue for something at the school, for concert band, and I was fearless. And I would write an arrangement, and was writing this thing called a suite from the 4 winds. And on the trumpet parts I had, with the asterisk, I'd say, play all B naturals a half step lower, because it sounds funny if you play it B natural straight. I didn't know that there was a key signature of a flat on the 3rd line that would take care of all that. But you know, you just learn step by step. If somebody's saying, idiot, you know, there's 1 flat and there's 2 flats and 3 flats. And oh yeah, key signatures, that's a great concept. It's been 500 years old, right? I went to a junior high school named Robert E. Kuntz Junior High School in Bremerton. And again, like they were, you know, there were just a few black kids in the school, like 2,800 kids there. And I'll never forget his name. A little white kid named Robin Fields said, I'd like to be your manager for you running for Boys Club president. I said, you've got to be out of your mind, you know, what are you talking about, you know? That's never gonna happen. And I was wrong. And I won. And I was messed up because my family of 1947, they moved to Seattle, and I had to get up at 5 o'clock every morning and catch the ferry, the Kalakala, and go back to Bremerton every morning because I was Boys Club president. And I'm telling you, that really put a hurting on my sleeping time. It made me realize that I had to take everybody one-on-one. It really did. I mean, that was really clear to me. That I couldn't say, bang, this is this, and everybody's this, and they like this, and all that stuff. The things we usually do as human beings. I couldn't do it because Robin Fields was there, and I couldn't put him in that number. I couldn't include him in that number, and it was great for me. We were like big fish in small ponds, you know, and that's why at one time in New York, most of the guys that were happening, by the time I finally got there, were not from New York because they got their confidence in these small cities. And you start in New York, you're dealing with the biggest guys, biggest in the world. You're dealing with Charlie Parker and all the big bands and everything. So anyway, with that experience, we were in a National Guard band. It was a all-black unit, which was funny because Bumps Blackwell, who had the pop band we're in, he was a commanding officer. And we'd go out to Fort Lewis for about 3 months in the summertime with the band. And we were master sergeants and all that stuff, and the staff sergeants because we were musicians. Definitely not because we were soldiers, because we didn't really get that at all, marching and the discipline of what the military thing was about. Because it wasn't real, because we were National Guard, we were young kids in the National Guard. We put our ages up, we were 14 years old. And one weekend, we had a job with the band, the dance band, to play at Island Lake Park or someplace like that. And we didn't come home that night. We stayed over there, and I was a company bugler. I was supposed to wake up the real troops, for bivouac. And Army doesn't play that. That was supposed to be at 7 o'clock. We didn't get back till 11 o'clock. And as we got out of the car, the real Army guys were saying, "Oh, Sergeant, we hope you have an explanation for this." I said, "We really don't, sir." He said, "Okay, Private, stand over there." We got demoted on the spot. And these are things that really stick out in your mind because you feel like you've really blown it and you failed out somehow. I don't know. I mean, I just I just started and started to pay attention. That's logical though, and you say, okay, bang, if you're off at 8 of a beat, you straighten that out the next day. You go step by step and get it right. And if you're standing out from all the other people, you're playing it wrong. So you have to understand the value of each note and so forth. And there's only 4 beats in each bar, or 6 or 3 or whatever it is. And I don't know. You just use your mother wit, common sense, really. In school, they have books and so forth. It's easy to get next to music theory, especially between your peers and music classes and so forth. You just pay attention, and I had a good ear, and so I realized all the reading music was about was just reminding you what to play. It's a lot of people say, well, Count Basie and Earl Hines don't read music. That's amazing. I mean, it has nothing to do with each other. Reading music is just a way to document it so you can remember what to play at the same time. But the creation of music has nothing to do with that at all. That's a sense of, it's a divine sense in a way, Well, Lionel Hampton's band came through Seattle in 2. That was a very significant thing in my life because, as I said before, we played with Bumps Blackwell's band and Charlotte Taylor's band for Billie Holiday and then Billy Eckstine at 14 and 15 years old. So Hamp came through there then, and that was my dream to be with that band, more than any band, because I saw every band that came through, Stan Kenton, Basie, Duke, Louis Armstrong, everybody. I was down front, hypnotized every night. I just couldn't believe it, that there is the way to be a man, to have your dignity, to be proud of what you do. And there were 18 musicians. There was something about that kind of unity, too, that were really playing good, and named military bands, the black military bands, or the white traveling bands, But there was something about it that just really hit a serious core in me, and I wanted to know everything about it. That's why I wanted to write so quick. And as soon as I picked up the trumpet, I heard the arrangements in my head of those ensembles. How do you write for 18 musicians or 8 brass and 5 saxes and not have them playing the same notes? So there was a man named Joseph Poe who was a military officer, and he had a dance band. He used to be with Wings Over Jordan, which was a famous choir. And so he asked me to babysit for him, and I loved to babysit for him because I could read his Glenn Miller orchestration books. And he had Frank Skinner underscoring about movies. And I mean, bam, that was like walking into a wonderland. I said, what? And then I got hung up on movies when I was 15. When I was in France, Mandela asked me to come down. I've been involved with South African Mandela for 30 years, and it's a way to really do something, And I mean, whether it's with Jesse or with whoever it is, it's we helped him put together Operation Push in the 70s, or Dr. King in 55. Julian Bond and Quincy Mufuni called. They're putting $9 million up, and they're doing a 10-city bus tour to go to Pittsburgh and St. Louis and Detroit and these places to try to get out the black vote, Because you have to do something. I mean, inside you're fighting for your dignity of your children, your grandchildren, and on the kids that should even be subjected to this kind of a thing. And what I'm also learning too is as I get older, and too, is that so many times just dealing with semantics, the word racism, it just blurs into economics and vice versa. It's amazing because slavery wasn't about racism. Slavery was about economics, about free labor, slave labor. And you see that happening too. And that's another thing that really bugs you. And so the thing is, you have to always try to go down to the core to see what the real problem is, because sometimes we're dealing with superficial problems. And what happens is that you've got, if the funnel of America, if they block that funnel, what you've got, whites and blacks or Hispanics or Asians or whatever fighting at the tunnel, the people at the $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 level fighting at that thing. You don't see the people with $3 million down there fighting with that level, So that was a big lesson to understand, that you've got to try to improve the economic plight of Black America too, and or any of the minority groups, so that this country can go on and get about being as powerful as it really can be. Because if everybody in America had that thing that we say we have, in the Constitution, this country would be hard to mess with. It's hard to mess with anyway because it's a powerful country. Because we have the diversities, if we could learn to respect the diversities, that's what makes us strong. I don't care what you say. Whatever the black kids in the ghetto are doing, man, 2 years later, every kid in America is going to be doing it.
That's a question that puzzles me a lot because it's so different today. My son's 26 years old. He's Quincy the third. He calls himself QD3. And he's doing very good because he's very hard worker and very talented. He is a hip hop producer. He produces Ice Cube. He produces LL Cool J and Naughty by Nature, the Lynch Mob. He does Fresh Prince and the Minister Society scores. And it frightened me because today is such a strange time to be in the music business. Everything is different. The instruments are different. The experience of jam sessions, the experience of bands playing together and looking in each other's eyes and transmitting thoughts with unspoken words, which is an incredible experience, were not happening anymore. And where most big producers now, they stay in a little room. You take Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, or Babyface and L.A. Reid, or whoever. They have drum machines and MIDI synthesizers that you can sequence or do anything you want. And there's hardly any contact out with the outside world, but except maybe two producers, the singer. You may do one live date with strings or brass. And it's just so different. So to answer your question, the converse side of what I see in a lot of young musicians who just want to be famous and very rich, very quick, was a goal that we didn't understand at all in those days because our idols were not symbolic of that. It was Charlie Parker and his people that almost died in poverty and drugs, and they didn't have that, they didn't think of opulence or that kind of living, of jet planes and limousines and all those things. Today that's a running thing. It's a huge business now, huge business where very, very young people make enormous amounts of money and have to deal with almost a superhuman position of trying to absorb that kind of adulation and recognition and fame and adoration and money. Is a very abnormal situation, and they're trying to make it normal because it's not normal. And so we have a lot of casualties as a result of that. It's a very difficult thing, and I kid a lot about it, but I'm really not, I'm serious when I say that the music business should collectively get together and start a university of success so they can see that there are patterns, and this is not the first person that ever been successful. And I think a lot of young people learn a lot because I've seen thousands come and go so quickly and in such a tragic way of just up and burn out and have to live with some very unpleasant memories and situations. On the positive side, there's probably more opportunities now than ever, and I'd say in 5 years, we will probably be going through a technological revolution that will be changing civilization from a communication standpoint. The way people will receive information through PCs, through fiber optics, through all the converging technologies, all the brand new spectrum real estate that's happening, it's going to be quite sensational. And we still have to remember, everything starts with two things: a song or a story. And that drives everything. And that's the people of the blank page. No matter what platform is put on, that's where we have to start. And the outlets are enormous today. It's on a global level, where it used to take us 4 years to release a record that was released in the United States. 4 years later, would come out in Europe. It's almost simultaneously now. Maybe sometimes it'll come out internationally before it comes out domestically. And the throw of communications is so powerful that just communications alone have changed the course of our world, from Tiananmen Square to Berlin Wall to communism, South Africa, everything. They weren't governmental agencies that changed it. It was records and television and movies that changed that. So far, I haven't found any experience that is more pleasurable than trying to. It takes you 2 nights to sit down at the blank page of score paper, and then try to imagine and hear that orchestra sound in your head, and put what you think is going to sound like you think it sounds on that paper for each instrument, and finally having the orchestra there, and when you do the downbeat, to hear that sound. There's no experience in the world like that. Still to this day, I feel like I'm 12 years old when I bring my hand down in the orchestra, even if it's like last night to hear God Bless America. It's just a miraculous. I guess what's so strong about it is that outside of you growing as an arranger or a composer or orchestrator, it's the idea that when you conduct a symphony orchestra, that 110 people plus the conductor are thinking about exactly the same thing at exactly the same time, down to the microscopic proportions, the 32nd and 64th notes. And that's a lot of energy, because minds aren't trailing off thinking about the news or what you've got what's in the stock market or anything today, or what you have to get for groceries or what's for dinner. It's exactly on what that thought is, the thought of the composer, whoever composed it, and the orchestrator, and performing it and reproducing it. And it's a very powerful experience. It's a very rewarding, enriching experience, and it hits you in your soul. It goes through the ear, but it hits the soul. You can't touch it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, you can't see it, and it's just so powerful for the soul.
Obsession. You really do. Everybody, it's an amazing thing to say, but everybody I know that really does their thing, and I have a lot of friends that are like that, and when I see the ones that really do it, they're junkies. They really are. I mean, that thing, it takes them over. It takes them. It really does. And everything, there's some kind of subconscious attraction to everything, even things you're not even aware of that you're interested in. I mean, my biggest problem in the world is going into a bookstore, because everything, just every subject from psychology to history to cuisine, everything in there I'm interested in. I just love it. And technology or biographies, history, and it does. Somehow all of those things reinforce each other, because I studied with Nadia Boulanger in Paris, and she, we talked about that before. She said something one time when She introduced me to Stravinsky, who she was like a mentor to, and I called him a genius, and she said it was a stupid word. And if it has to be applied, it should be applied to somebody that has achieved the highest level of involving sensation, feeling, believing, attachment, and knowledge. And there's all those things. All those things have to be pulled together, you know. And the ability to be able to discern that which is important. I mean, that's a big word, because it makes you interested in your point of view. Stravinsky always used to talk about, in the poetics of music, he always used to talk about the most important part of an artist's responsibility is to be a great observer. You know, if it's in human nature or just to pay attention to see what it's all about. Because I think African music is so powerful and probably governs the rhythm of every music in the world, is because it's taken straight from nature. You know that the birds did not imitate flutes. It's the reverse. And thunder didn't imitate the drums. You know, it was the reverse. And so the elements of nature, when it comes from that's the most powerful force there is. Just like a melody. You can study orchestration, you can study harmony and theory and everything else, but melodies come straight from God. There's really no technique for melodies, really. And so that's, I guess, there's something about music that's always fascinated me, and I apply what the essence of that's about into everything I do, whether we do film or magazines or whatever it is. You can't touch it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, you can't see it. You just feel it, and it hangs in the air. It owns, it dominates every time period, you know. String quartets had its own time period, and nobody can ever change it because it's hanging up there in heaven someplace. The pulse is they use the 440 to tune up to A, and I hear that the pulse of the universe is 454. You know, that's pretty close. And so that A has something to do with much more than just a note. You know, it's got something to do with just what a natural rhythm of what life is about.